Lecture 15, Living a Jewish Life.
We've already seen that Jews are storytellers. During their rituals and holidays, Jews tell many stories, often using things other than words. Meaning can be communicated through the arrangement of items on a plate, through the construction of a booth, through the spinning of a top and the lighting of candles. Some of these involve work, but the heart of the Jewish religious life is a day in which no work is done. Shabbat, or the Sabbath. The rhythm of the week for observant Jews is woven around Shabbat. The Jewish Sabbath begins at sundown on Friday night and ends at sundown Saturday night. In fact, all Jewish holidays and festivals begin at sundown, as a Jewish day begins at nightfall. In the creation story of Genesis, God rests from the work of creation on the seventh day, and the obligation for the Jewish people to likewise observe the Sabbath is found in the Ten Commandments. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. In it thou shalt not do any manner of work, for the Lord rested on the seventh day, blessed the Sabbath day, and hallowed it. The significance of the Sabbath to the Jewish people is expressed in the saying, more than the Jews have kept the Sabbath has kept the Jews. The appropriate greeting to give someone on the Sabbath is Shabbat Shalom. The Sabbath is celebrated at home with a special dinner on Friday night. The Sabbath candles are usually lit by the woman of the house, who covers her head and closes her eyes and moves her hands to bring in the Sabbath light as she recites the prayer. Prayers are recited over the bread and the wine, and a special meal is eaten, usually featuring bread known as challah. Sabbath services are held in the synagogue on Friday evening, Saturday morning, and Saturday afternoon. In Orthodox prayer services, men and women sit in separate sections. In accordance with Orthodox views on gender relations, it's best to avoid offering your hand to an Orthodox Jew of the opposite sex. Jewish Sabbath services generally feature reading and chanting from the Torah and the prophets. The reading from the prophets is known as the Haftarah. Congregational and private prayer, singing, and a sermon from the rabbi. For their synagogue services, Jews use a siddur, or prayer book, containing the prayers that are used in various services. Services are usually led by a rabbi, and many synagogues often feature a cantor or chazan, who sings and chants and leads the congregation in song. The Sabbath is a day for reading and reflecting on the Torah, praying and spending time with family and friends, enjoying good food and conversation. It's also the best day for sexual relations between a husband and wife, as sex is considered a sacred act when done in accordance with the law. Ultimately, the Sabbath is a way of stepping outside of the usual concerns of our lives, slowing down, focusing on what is of true importance, God and the people who give our lives meaning. In order to do this, the Torah says, we must put all work aside. The rabbis have spelled out what this means, and there are many categories of forbidden activities. Jews who observe the Sabbath most strictly not only avoid all work related to their professions, but also avoid using electricity. They won't even turn a light switch on or off. The use of ovens or anything that produces heat, using the telephone, and traveling by any method other than walking. As with all Jewish laws, there are exceptions made for emergencies, and exceptions are always allowed in order to save a human life. The highest value in Judaism is life, which is why the best way to give a toast at a Jewish meal is to say, L'chaim, to life. Jewish law guides all daily activities, providing boundaries on what's acceptable to eat, wear, and even say, avoiding gossip, for example. Throughout the day, one's attention should turn to God, and one should offer prayers of gratitude for every blessing. Prayers are said upon waking and going to bed, before eating and drinking. The blessing over the bread, for example, is Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz, which means, Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who brings forth bread from the earth. There's even a prayer used after going to the bathroom. In part, this prayer goes, Blessed art thou, our God, ruler of the universe, who has formed human beings in wisdom and created in them a system of ducts and tubes, who healest all creatures and does wonders. It's an important reminder of what a remarkable creation the human body is. In the religion of the ancient Israelites, purity was a central concern, and this continues among many Jews today, especially Orthodox Jews. For this reason, among the Orthodox especially, the mikvah, a ritual bath used for purification, is of great importance. In fact, in most cases, when someone converts to Judaism, they must immerse in a mikvah. Following menstruation each month and childbirth, an Orthodox woman must go to the mikvah prior to resuming sexual relations with her husband. Women also use the mikvah before their wedding, and many Orthodox men do so as well. While mikvah use is not required for men, many Orthodox men still use a mikvah on various occasions, including Yom Kippur, and particularly for Hasidic Jews, before the Sabbath. There are a number of objects that are used as part of the prayer rituals for Jews who worship according to traditional forms. To begin with, Orthodox, many conservative, and some Reform Jews keep their heads covered. This is often done with a kippah, a cap. It's called a yarmulke in Yiddish. Women will sometimes cover with a headscarf, and many Orthodox women will wear a wig. Even Jews who do not cover their heads normally will put on a kippah for synagogue services. If you're a non-Jew who attends a synagogue service, it's recommended that you cover your head out of respect. Extra kippot are usually available at the synagogue. Observant traditional Jews who pray 3 times daily wear a talit, a prayer shawl with fringes at the end. For weekday morning prayers, men, and sometimes women, put on tefillin, phylacteries, which consist of 2 small leather boxes containing verses from the Bible, including the Shema. It's the recitation that begins, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. One box is tied on the forehead and the other on the upper left arm close to the heart. This is in accordance with the commandment regarding the words of the Shema to bind them as a sign on your hand and let them serve as a symbol on your forehead. Jews are also commanded to inscribe the words of the Shema on the doorposts of your house. For this reason, Jews will attach a mezuzah to the doorframe. A mezuzah is a piece of parchment on which is written the Shema, and it's contained in a decorative case. Some Jews hang a mezuzah in front of every room of the house except the bathroom, while others place it only in front of the main entrance. Since we're talking about Jewish symbols, I'll briefly discuss a symbol that's come to stand for Judaism for many people, the Star of David. The 6-pointed star, composed of 2 triangles, is said to represent the tribes of Judah and Benjamin. The symbol probably came into use as a religious symbol in the 11th century. During the Holocaust, Jews were forced to wear a yellow Star of David to identify themselves. And when the State of Israel was founded in 1948, a blue Star of David on a white background between 2 blue stripes became the Israeli flag. The issue of kosher food will be important if you dine with Jewish friends who keep kosher, although only around 15% of American Jews strictly observe kosher laws. The laws of kashrut, or kosher laws, are found in the Hebrew Bible and elaborated in the Talmud. They fall into 3 general areas. First, allowable and prohibited foods. There are a number of animals that observant Jews are forbidden to eat. The Torah defines certain animals as unclean and thus forbidden. Animals with cloven hoofs who chew their cud are permissible, such as cows and sheep, but animals outside that group, like pigs and rabbits, are not. So Jews avoid all pork products. Poultry is permitted, and fish with gills and fins are permitted, but not shellfish. So kosher Jews do not eat shrimp, shellfish, or crab, for instance. Second category is kosher meat. So if the animal is permitted for food, it still must be slaughtered in accordance with biblical law. Understood to be a relatively humane way of slaughtering animals, kosher slaughter requires the use of a very sharp knife wielded by a trained Jewish slaughterer who severs the carotid artery, jugular vein, and windpipe in a single motion to ensure the rapid loss of consciousness. In Jewish tradition, blood has been forbidden to consume from earliest times. People could eat the flesh of the animal, but its blood, its life, belongs to God. So Jewish kosher slaughter practices ensure that all blood is separated, and practices such as soaking and salting the meat are used for this purpose. The third category involves meat and dairy. The book of Deuteronomy states, "You shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk." The rabbis have interpreted this to mean that meat and dairy should not be consumed together. You can use animals for one thing or the other, but not for both. So Jews who follow kosher laws do not mix meat and dairy. And they have to wait hours after consuming one to consume the other. So don't offer a cheeseburger to a kosher Jew. In kosher homes, there's a complete separation of dishes and utensils used for meat and those used for dairy. All foods outside the category of meat or dairy, such as fish, fruit, vegetables, and bread, are considered parv, or neutral, and these can be eaten with either meat or dairy. Some Jews are beginning to argue that the best way to honor the intent of kosher laws, which promote care and compassion for animals, is to eat a vegetarian diet. Vegetarians who avoid all animal flesh automatically satisfy the kosher rules that we've discussed. In fact, some rabbis who are advocating this approach point out that in the Garden of Eden, before the fall, Adam and Eve are permitted only vegetarian food to eat. Meat eating, with many restrictions, is only permitted after the flood, which many see as a concession to human weakness. So, while an omnivorous diet is allowed, the argument goes, a vegetarian diet may still be an ideal. We'll begin our look at holidays and festivals with the most important period of the Jewish liturgical year, the High Holy Days. These begin with the Jewish New Year, Rosh Hashanah, which is celebrated in September or October in accordance with the Jewish lunar calendar. During Rosh Hashanah and throughout the period of the High Holy Days that culminates in Yom Kippur, Jews reflect on their deeds of the previous year, stand before God's judgment, and commit themselves to righteous living in the coming year. One of the most distinctive characteristics of the Rosh Hashanah service is the blowing of the shofar, a ram's horn that produces a piercing, haunting blast featuring both staccato and legato notes when it's blown properly. It's really difficult to get a good sound from a shofar. The shofar is mentioned in the Bible, and it's said that the Israelites trembled when the sound of a shofar echoed from the thick clouds on Mount Sinai. The shofar was blown to usher in holidays, and it's said that the shofar wakes up those who are sleeping and reminds people that they stand before God. The foods most commonly associated with Rosh Hashanah are apples and honey, which symbolize a sweet new year. The greeting that's given on this day is Lashana Tova, wishing others a good year. 10 days after Rosh Hashanah comes the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, considered the holiest day of the Jewish year. The main purpose of this day is to atone for one's transgressions, and Jews are expected not only to engage in introspection and ask forgiveness from God, but also to ask for forgiveness from those they may have wronged the previous year. Yom Kippur is a day of fasting for observant Jews, and unless an exception is granted for medical reasons, all Jewish adults are required to abstain from food, drink, sexual relations, and wearing perfume or leather shoes during Yom Kippur. There are many other holidays in the Jewish year, but we'll discuss only the 4 most popular and commonly observed holidays here. 2 traditional pilgrimage festivals that have biblical origins, Passover and Sukkot, and 2 popular holidays, Hanukkah and Purim, both of which commemorate triumphant events in Jewish history. If you want to give a nice greeting to Jews on these holidays, you can simply wish them a Happy Passover or a Happy Hanukkah, but a good all-purpose greeting for a joyful holiday is Chag Sameach, which basically means Happy Holiday. One of the most widely celebrated holidays, even among largely secular Jews, is Passover, or Pesach. Like many holidays, it has elements of seasonal celebration and historical commemoration. Passover begins after the first full moon following the spring equinox, so in March or April. And it has a number of elements that celebrate the renewal of life and hope. But the real focus of the holiday is the commemoration, in fact, the retelling, of the story of the liberation of the Israelite slaves from the land of Egypt as found in the book of Exodus. The holiday is celebrated for 7 or 8 days, with the primary celebratory meals occurring on the first 2 nights. The heart of the Passover celebration is the Seder, a meal at which the Exodus story is told and sung, and at which symbolic foods are featured and consumed. Passover Seders are usually times of large family get-togethers, and everyone who sits around the table gets a Passover Haggadah, which is a text that everyone reads from. The readings primarily recount the story of God's liberating the Israelite people and Moses' role in leading the Israelites to freedom. Those sitting at the table take turns reading passages. There's a special role for children who read a set of questions about why this night is different from all other nights. On the center of the table is a Seder plate that contains a number of symbolic foods. The most well-known of these is matzah, unleavened bread, more like a cracker, that's eaten throughout the holiday. According to tradition, when the Israelites were fleeing the Egyptians, they didn't have time to let the bread rise, but ate it flat. And for that reason, throughout Passover, Jews do not eat any bread, cookies, pasta, or other leavened items. In the homes of Jews who are strictly observing the law, there's an intensive search and destroy mission to rid the home of any leavened items. This is normally preceded by major house cleaning activities. As part of the Passover celebration, a piece of matzah is wrapped and hidden. This is known as the afikomen, or dessert. Children search for this, and the one who finds it, or all children in less competitive homes, receives money or a small gift. There are a number of other symbolic items on the Seder plate. For example, there are bitter herbs called maror that represent the bitterness of the slaves in Egypt. There's also haroset, a mixture of nuts and fruit that represents the mortar the slaves used to build the bricks for the Egyptians. And there's a shank bone, which represents the sacrificial lamb. The Seder ritual is a way to transmit the founding narrative of the Jewish people and bring together members of the community. The holiday of Sukkot also has a seasonal and historical aspect. It's a week-long fall harvest festival occurring in late September or October. Historically, Sukkot commemorates the journey of the Israelites in the desert after escaping from Egypt. While there are special prayers and services on Sukkot, the most distinctive feature of the holiday is the sukkah, or booth, a structure built outdoors to represent the portable dwellings of the wandering Israelites during their 40 years in the desert. Observant Jews build a sukkah with a roof made of plant material, like branches, and decorate it with agricultural products. Many Jews eat meals in the sukkah, and some choose to live in it throughout the week. Hanukkah, the festival of lights, is one of the most well-known and widely celebrated holidays for Jews in the West. Hanukkah is celebrated anywhere from late November to late December. The holiday celebrates the victory of the Jewish people under the leadership of the Maccabees over the Hellenistic Syrians, who forbade Jewish practices and were trying to force the worship of Greek gods on the Jews, a story we told in the last lecture. The main theme of the holiday is the need for Jews to maintain their commitment to their tradition, even in the midst of powerful outside forces who threaten them, as well as inside forces that embrace assimilation and abandon Judaism, as some Jews at the time were doing. A miracle story is associated with the holiday. After the Jewish victories, the temple had to be rededicated since it had been defiled by the Syrians. The rededication process required the menorah in the temple to burn every night, but there was only enough oil for one night, insufficient to last till a fresh supply of holy oil became available. However, the oil burned for 8 days, which was enough time to get the new supply. So Hanukkah is celebrated for 8 days. And its main symbol is an 8-branched menorah, a candelabrum, with a 9th branch usually elevated above the other 8 to hold the helper candle that will light the others. The menorah in the ancient temple, which held 7 flames, has become a symbol for Judaism. It's on the official emblem of Israel. The Hanukkah menorah is technically called a Chanukiah because of its place for 8 candles and the helper candle. On Hanukkah, a candle is lit for each night of the holiday, so 1 on the first night, 2 on the second, and so on, until the entire Hanukkah